As a repository maintainer, you sometimes can see such message here, a warning that one of your dependencies is vulnerable. And if you then go to the alerts in Dependabot, you then exactly see which dependency here is vulnerable and also like the severity. If you then click on it, then you will see also, okay, this is the package that uses this package here, and this package here in that version is vulnerable and you need to update to this. So in my case, my application has a dependency on Caparo Core, which has a dependency itself on Lodash, and with the try again button, Dependabot will try to update the Lodash version here. It checks then the package log JSON file or yarn log file, depending on which package manager you are using. And often it is not successful. So for example, here we can see that Dependabot cannot update Lodash to a non-vulnerable version. And that's where we need to help the Dependabot. Back in our IDE, we can also check why there is Lodash in our dependency graph. The command yarn y plus the package name will tell us how it comes that it is inside our node modules directory. By the way, you can do the same using npm explain. We see that multiple dependencies have a dependency on Lodash. So there's TapTap, which uses Inquirer, which uses then Lodash, but there's also then Caparo Core, which uses Winston, and Winston uses async, and async uses Lodash. So we have here a transitive dependency on TapTap, Inquirer, and Lodash, and we also have from Caparo Core a transitive dependency through Winston, async, and Lodash. By the way, a transitive dependency is a dependency from your dependency. So if you have a dependency, that's a direct dependency. And if this dependency has a dependency itself, then this is your transitive dependency. On top of that, there is a direct dependency from Caparo Core on Lodash, which resolves to version 4.17.15, which is the vulnerable run. So we not only resolve to one version of Lodash, but also to two different ones. Let's have a quick review. I will enter yarn y Lodash again. We can see that Lodash resolves to two different versions here in my project. One's to version 4.17.21, and this resolution comes from Caparo Core table Lodash, Caparo Core TapTap Inquirer Lodash, and Caparo Core Winston async Lodash. Another version is resolved, which is version 4.17.15, and that resolution comes from the direct dependency on Lodash in Caparo Core. Let's see how dependency resolution works. So we have table that requires Lodash, and they all come from a dependency inside of Caparo Core. So when we open the yarn log file, we can look for Caparo Core, and when we see Caparo Core, we will find a dependency on table. Here we can see that Caparo Core depends on the table package, which is defined with version 5.4.6. And the table version 5.4.6 itself has a dependency on Lodash version 4.17.14 with a little caret here as prefix. Now we have to talk a bit about dependency resolution, because when you define a dependency, then you can put, for example, this caret here or a tilde, and it means that when the dependency is being downloaded, npm should download at least this version or a version newer than this. And that's, by the way, why there is always a package JSON file and a package log JSON file, or in this case, a yarn log file. Because that log file describes which version was actually being downloaded. So to which version was the version description here resolved. So when you have a caret, and you write 4.17.14, it means bring me please major version 4 and anything like later than 17.14. So you will stick to major version 4 with the caret, but you can then resolve that 4.17.14 also to a 4.18 or anything newer, as long as you stay in the range of the major version. If you have a tilde, then it would mean please resolve to tilde 4.17.14, so that will affect the patch version. Patch version is the last number. So you will get anything that is 4.17.14 and newer on the patch level, so 4.17.15, 4.17.16, but not a 4.18, for example. Yeah, and This resolution is then described in the log file. Let's have a look at another example. So there's tap, which requires inquirer, and inquirer also then has a dependency on loadish. So here's tap, and then I will make the window a bit bigger, and we will see that tap then has the dependency on an inquirer, which in the end has a dependency on loadish. We can see here that it requires loadish for 1712 with a caret, so it can be written as 4xx. Yeah, we stay with the major version, and it basically says bring me the latest of version 4. So these caret resolutions are cool because they will all resolve to 4.17.21 in the end, which is the one that has the security fix. However, there's this very one dependency from Capel core that brings loadish 4.17.15 and nothing newer than this. So we need to check why is this the case, because that's the one that brings us here the security vulnerability warning. If we check the dependencies of Capel core, then we see here the direct dependency on loadish, and there's the mistake. There's no caret, so it would be nice if there would be one, but there is no one, which means it will always resolve to 4.17.15 and not bring any newer version. Since 4.17.15 is vulnerable, this is then where our warning comes from. So let's have a look at loadish, and here we see how loadish then in the end is resolved, and the 4.17.15 declaration is resolved to version, of course, 4.17.15. And the other versions that had the caret are then being resolved to version 4.17.21. So we see that here the direct resolution to 4.17.15 is the one that creates and triggers the warning. Luckily, there's a very easy fix for it. We just have to go back to our package.json, and there we can define how loadish should be resolved. So we can add an entry here that is called resolutions. I will just find a good point to insert this. So here I can write resolutions, and I can write that every dependency on loadish should resolve to a specific version that I define here. And I will define the version 4.17.21, which is the one where the security vulnerability is fixed. If I then execute yarn again, my yarn log file will get updated. And we see a little warning because we are now overwriting the resolution to 4.17.15 to always resolve to 4.17.21. So if we have a look at the modifications in our yarn log file, we will see that all statements to resolve loadish will resolve to 4.17.21. Even the entry with a fixed version number 4.17.15 will then in the end be resolved to 4.17.21. By the way, you can also nest that, so if you don't want that every loadish version resolves against that specific version, you can then also say, okay, you take your main package, corporal, and then core, and only from corporal, the direct dependency loadish should resolve to a version that you specify here. And I will now just resolve it against patch version 20, so that you just see how this looks then in our log file. So if I now execute yarn again, then our log file will be updated. If we take a look at the log file, then we will see that this version here of 4.17.15 will resolve to 4.17.20, and the other loadish declarations here will still resolve to the 4.17.21 as we've seen before. If you want to be future-proof, then it's actually cool to not specify here an exact version, but also make use of the caret. So if we place a caret in front of 4.17.20, then it will also bring us always the latest version in the spectrum of major version 4. So we will get now the 4.17.21, or if something newer appears, we'll get something newer when we execute yarn again. Also take this in mind, like you need to update the log files in order to then resolve to newer dependencies. So now in the log file, it will be written that we resolve to 4.17.21, but if a 4.17.22 comes out, then this one won't be automatically downloaded as long as it's not written in the log file. And in order to be written to the log file, we need to execute yarn to update the log file. And then those log file updates need to be committed to your repository. Otherwise, people that use your package will still then resolve to the versions that were defined specifically in the log file. So always make sure then to keep your log file up to date and committed to the repository in order to prevent those security warnings on GitHub and ultimately on the NPM ecosystem. Final suggestion from my side, I don't like this caret syntax because I find it quite cryptic. So instead of using it, you can also write XX, and for XX will look like version 4 and then placeholder for the minor and the patch version. And this will be the same as using the caret. By the way, if you want to know if your application has security vulnerabilities in your dependencies, just enter npm audit, or if you're using Yarn and you have a Yarn log file, then enter Yarn audit. This will give you a report of all the packages that you are using in your application, so your direct dependencies and transitive dependencies. And as you can see, 553 packages have been found in total. And since we upgraded the Lodash version here, there are no more known vulnerabilities. So a Yarn audit or npm audit is a great tool to get a report of security implications.